Here is the paraphrased version of your script, with the word order slightly adjusted while preserving the original writing style, rhythm, and tone. Louisiana, music, 1838. Born in a stable, a black enslaved boy was raised among horses. The white overseer called him Beast. At 13, music, they locked him inside with a wild stallion that had killed before, expecting the music animal to crush him by morning. When dawn came, the men found something beyond explanation. The boy stood unharmed, his hand resting on the horse's lowered head. The animal had bowed. What happened in that locked stable would become a ghost story whispered for music generations. But the truth was darker, stranger, and more powerful than any legend. They called him Colt. Not a name, a label, music, like branding livestock. He had no family name, no baptism, no record of birth beyond a music, blood-stained note in the plantation ledger. Asterisk Negro boy, stable-born, mother dead. Asterisk the Belmont plantation in rural Louisiana, music, stretched across 2,000 acres of cotton fields and cruelty. Enslaved people worked from dawn until collapse. Mothers were separated from children. Backs bore scars like tree rings, one lash for each year of suffering. Colt grew up sleeping in hay, eating scraps meant for animals, learning to move silently so the white men would forget he existed. Among the other enslaved children, he had no friends. They feared him. He smelled like horses. He barely, music, spoke. His eyes held something wild and distant, as if part of him lived somewhere humans could not reach. The white overseer, a man named Pike with tobacco-stained teeth and a leather whip, music, always coiled at his belt, told visitors that Colt was half animal, raised, music, by beasts. He said it like a joke, but watched the boy with suspicion, as if waiting for proof. What Pike, music, did not know, what no one knew, was that Colt understood something the plantation owners had spent generations trying, music, to destroy. The language of survival that exists beneath words, in breath and stillness, and the space between heartbeats. He learned it from the one creature that had chosen not to kill him when it, music, could have. The wild black stallion in the far stable. And in 1851, the night they locked him in with that horse, everything the white men believed about control, dominance, and power would shatter. But the real shock would come years later, after the escape, after the body, after the war, when the truth finally surfaced about what that boy and that horse had really been to each other and what they had done. Before we continue this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Stories like this must never be forgotten. Let's continue. The night Colt was born, lightning split the sky like God tearing paper. Rain hammered the stable roof. Inside, a woman named Essie screamed alone in the darkness, her body convulsing on filthy, music, straw. She was 19 years old. That day, she had picked cotton for 12 hours, music, her belly swollen and heavy, because the overseer said pregnant slaves who rested were lazy slaves, and lazy slaves got the whip. No one came to help her. The main house, music, was locked. The white doctor lived 3 miles away and would not come for a slave birth in a storm. After dark, the other enslaved women were locked in the quarters, plantation rules. So Essie labored alone, music, gripping handfuls of hay, biting down on a leather strap to keep from screaming loud enough to wake the overseer. She knew what happened to women who disturbed the master's sleep. The baby came just before midnight, small, silent, blue-lipped. Essie tried to rub him warm, but her hands were shaking, her vision blurring. Blood pooled beneath her. Too much blood. She wrapped the infant in her torn dress and held him against her chest, whispering a prayer she barely remembered from childhood. Then her eyes closed. Her breathing stopped. The baby lay against his dead mother's body in the cold stable. He should have died within the hour, but he did not. In the darkness, a horse moved. A massive black stallion, wild caught 2 months earlier from the marshlands, untamed and vicious. The plantation owner, Master Belmont, had paid $50 for the animal, certain he could break it for racing. So far, the horse had bitten 3 handlers and kicked a stable boy so hard the child lost 4 teeth. The stallion approached the dead woman and the dying infant. It lowered its enormous head, sniffed. Then slowly, impossibly, it folded its legs and lay down beside the bodies. Its bulk pressed against the baby, radiating heat. The infant stirred, corked, began to breathe in shallow, desperate gasps. An old enslaved woman named Ayu found them at dawn. She had come to the stable early to tend the horses before the white men woke. When she pushed open the door, she saw the dead mother, the living child, and the wild stallion curled around both like a guardian. Ayu stood frozen. In her 60 years, she had delivered dozens of babies. She had seen children born sick, born dying, born dead. She had never seen anything like this. The horse lifted its head and looked at her, not aggressive, not afraid, just watching. Ayu whispered, "Lord have mercy." She retrieved the baby carefully, expecting the stallion to attack. It did not move. She carried the infant to the quarters, washed him, fed him goat's milk from a rag. He survived the first day, then the second. By the third day, Ayu knew he would live. When Master Belmont learned about the birth, he walked to the quarters and stared at the baby without expression. He was a lean man with grey eyes and a mouth that rarely smiled. He owned 143 enslaved people. He knew their market value down to the dollar. A healthy male infant was worth future labor. A sickly one was a waste of resources. "What's his condition?" Belmont asked. "Small, sir," Ayu said carefully, but breathing steady. Belmont nodded. "His mother dead, sir. Hemorrhage. Unfortunate." Belmont showed no emotion. "She was a decent picker." He looked at the baby again. "This one was born in the stable." "Yes, sir." "Among the horses?" "Yes, sir." Belmont's mouth twitched. "Not quite a smile." "Then he'll work the stables. When he's old enough. Until then, he's your responsibility. If he dies, it's no loss. If he lives, he earns his keep." He turned to leave, then paused. "What are you calling him?" Ayu hesitated. Enslaved people often chose names quietly, names the white owners never knew. But Belmont was asking directly. She had to answer. "Thought maybe Samuel, sir, after, no." Belmont's voice was flat. "He was born with horses. Raised by a horse, apparently. Call him Colt. Like a young horse. That's what he is." Ayu's jaw tightened. She said nothing. Belmont walked away. Behind him, the baby made a small sound, not quite a cry, more like the soft nicker of a newborn foal. Colt grew up in the space between human and animal. He slept in the stable loft on a pile of burlap sacks. He ate in the stable yard with a wooden bowl, often the same mash of cornmeal and fat given to the pigs. He wore hammer-down clothes too large for his small frame, tied with rope, always smelling of manure and hay. The other enslaved children avoided him. They whispered that he was cursed, that his mother's ghost lived in the stables, that the horse that saved him was not really a horse but something else. Colt did not care. He preferred the horses. Horses did not lie. They did not pretend. They did not smile at you in the morning and beat you in the afternoon. By age 4, Colt could curry a horse, clean hooves, and identify lameness by watching an animal walk. By age 5, he could saddle a horse faster than the white stable hands. By age 6, he understood that he was not like the other children, not in the eyes of the white men, not even in the eyes of his own people. He was something else. Something in between. The white men called him the stable rat. The enslaved workers called him the quiet one. Pike the overseer called him Beast Boy and sometimes just *it star. Pike was a cruel man who believed enslaved people were animals that needed breaking like wild horses. He carried a whip and used it freely. He had cold blue eyes and a way of smiling that made even the strongest men look away. He hated Colt in a specific way, not with anger, but with disgust, the way someone might hate a spider or a snake. "That one's got no soul," Pike said once to another white handler. "Born in shit, raised by an animal. Look at his eyes. Nothing in there but instinct." Colt was 6 years old when Pike decided to teach him a lesson about consequences. It happened on a June morning. Colt was mucking out stalls when he heard a horse screaming, not the normal sounds horses made. This was panic. Pain. He dropped his shovel and ran toward the sound. In the training pen, Pike was whipping a young mare. The horse was rearing, eyes rolling, white foam at its mouth. Pike laughed and cracked the whip again. "You'll learn," Pike shouted. "You'll learn or you'll bleed." Colt did not think. He ran to the pen gate, unlatched it, swung it wide. The mare bolted through, galloping toward the open fields. Pike spun around. His face went red. "What did you do?" Colt stood frozen. He had acted on instinct. Now his mind caught up to his body, and fear flooded through him. Pike walked toward him slowly, coiling the whip. "You just cost Master Belmont a valuable horse. You know what that means." Colt could not speak. Pike grabbed him by the shirt, lifted him off the ground. "It means you're going to learn what happens when property damages property." They locked him in the punishment cell. It was a stone shed behind the stable, barely 4 feet tall, no windows, no light. Enslaved people called it the box. Men and women had died in there from heat, from thirst, from simply giving up. Pike shoved Colt inside and slammed the wooden door. The lock clicked. Darkness swallowed everything. 3 days, Pike said through the door. "No food, no water. When you come out, maybe you'll remember your place." Colt heard footsteps walking away. Then silence. The darkness was total. He could not see his own hands. The air was thick and hot, hard to breathe. He tried to stand but hit his head on the low ceiling. He crouched in the corner, hugging his knees, trying not to panic. Hours passed, maybe days. He lost track. His throat burned with thirst, his stomach cramped with hunger. He hallucinated, saw his mother's face, heard voices whispering, felt insects crawling on his skin even though nothing was there. On what might have been the second night, he heard something outside. Hoofbeats, slow and deliberate, circling the stone shed. Then a sound he knew, a low nicker. The black stallion. Colt pressed his ear to the wall. The horse was just outside. He could hear its breathing. He whispered, "I'm here." The horse stayed all night. Colt could feel its presence through the stone, a living warmth just beyond the wall. It made the darkness less absolute. It made him feel less alone. When Pike opened the door on the 3rd day, Colt stumbled out into blinding sunlight. He collapsed on the ground, gasping, his lips cracked and bleeding. "You survive." Pike sounded disappointed. Colt nodded weakly. "Good. Get back to work." Colt crawled toward the water trough, drank until he vomited, then drank again. His vision swam. His legs shook, but he stood. He walked to the stable, and there in the far, music, stall, he found the black stallion. The horse lowered its head. Colt placed, music, his small hand on the animal's nose. Something passed between them in that moment. Not music, words, not thoughts, something older and deeper. A recognition. From that day forward, music, the stallion would not let anyone else touch it. It would kick, bite, rear at any white handler. But when Colt approached, music, the horse became still, calm, obedient. Pike noticed. Master, music, Belmont noticed. They did not understand it, but they saw the usefulness. A 6-year-old slave who could control a wild stallion, music, was valuable. So they let Colt live. They let him stay in the stables. They gave him more work with, music, the horses. And Colt learned. He learned that survival meant silence. Music, it meant watching. It meant becoming invisible until the moment you were needed. He learned, music, to read the moods of white men the way he read the moods of horses, by the tension in their shoulders, the tone of their voice, music, the way they moved through space. He learned that power was not always about size or strength. Sometimes power was about music, knowing when to submit and when to resist. Sometimes power was about patience. The black stallion taught him that, music, every day, in the language of breath and stillness, in the space, music, between heartbeats. By age 8, Colt could break a young horse to saddle in half the time it took, music, the white trainers. By age 9, he could diagnose illness in horses before the veterinarian arrived. By age, music, 10, he had become indispensable to the plantation's horse operation. Master Belmont began showing him off to visitors. "Watch this," Belmont would say, gesturing to Colt. "The boy has a gift. Born for it. Born among them, you see." Colt would demonstrate. Music, he would approach a difficult horse, place his hand on its neck, whisper something, and the animal would calm. The white men would nod appreciatively, as if witnessing a trained dog perform a trick. "How much for the boy?" a visiting plantation owner asked once. "Not for sale," Belmont said. "Too useful." Colt understood what that meant. He was valuable enough to keep alive, not valuable enough to be treated as music, human. He was a tool, a specialized instrument. As long as he performed his function, he would survive. But survival came with a cost. He had to watch other enslaved people being whipped for small infractions. He had to watch children being sold away from their mothers. He had to watch men and women worked until they collapsed in the fields, then dragged back to the quarters to recover just enough to work again. He had to watch and say nothing, do nothing, be nothing but the quiet stable boy who understood horses. An old enslaved blacksmith named Moses noticed, music, Colt's silence. Moses was nearly 70, his back bent from decades of labor, his hands scarred from forge work. He shod the plantation horses and spoke rarely. But he saw things. He understood things. One evening, music, Moses found Colt in the stable brushing the black stallion. Moses watched for a moment, then said, "You talk to that horse more than you talk to people." Colt did not look up. Horses listen. So do people. Some of them. People lie. Music, Moses nodded slowly. "That's true. White people lie with their mouths. Our people lie with their silence. But horses only speak truth. That's why you trust them." Colt paused. It was the most anyone had understood him. Moses stepped closer. "You got a gift, boy. But gifts can be traps. The master sees what you can do. He'll use it. He'll use you until there's nothing left. Then he'll discard you like a broken plow. What else can I do? Survive. But not just your body, your spirit, too. Don't let them make you into what they say you are." Colt looked at Moses. "They say I'm a beast. Then prove them wrong or prove them right in a way they don't expect." Moses smiled slightly. "Beasts can bite." The years passed. Colt grew taller, though he remained lean and small for his age. Malnutrition had stunted his growth. His hands were calloused from work. His back bore scars from the few times Pike had whipped him for perceived slowness or insolence. At age 12, Master Belmont decided Colt needed to be properly marked as plantation property. Enslaved people on Belmont Plantation were sometimes branded, usually on the shoulder or back with the master's initials or a symbol. It was illegal in some states, but Louisiana law was loosely enforced, and Belmont did what he wanted on his own land. Pike suggested something different for Colt. "Brand him with something appropriate," Pike said. "The boy's more animal than human. Brand him like livestock." Belmont considered this. He was drunk at the time, sitting on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set over his fields. "What do you suggest?" "The word *fera*, Pike said. He had learned a little Latin from a traveling preacher. "It means beast. Wild animal. That's what he is." Belmont laughed. "Poetic. Do it." They heated the branding iron in the forge. Moses was forced to prepare it. His hands shook as he worked the bellows. He whispered to Colt, "I'm sorry, boy. I got no choice." "I know," Colt said quietly. They brought Colt to the yard in front of the stables. Pike held the glowing iron. 4 white men held Colt down. They tied the black stallion to a post 20 feet away, forcing the horse to watch. "This is so you remember," Pike said, pressing the iron toward Colt's left shoulder. "You're not people. You're property. You're..." The iron touched skin. Colt's vision went white with pain. He bit down on a leather strap they had shoved in his mouth. He did not scream. He had learned long ago that screaming only made white men laugh. But the black stallion screamed for him. The horse reared against the rope, eyes rolling, hooves striking the air. The sound was primal, furious, heartbroken. Then the rope snapped. The stallion charged. Pike stumbled backward, dropping the iron. The horse bit Pike's shoulder, tearing through cloth and flesh. Pike screamed. The other white men scrambled away. The stallion stood over Colt's body, head lowered, ears pinned back, ready to kill anyone who came closer. Master Belmont ran from the house with a rifle. Get that animal away from him. But the horse would not move. It stood guard over Colt like a mother protecting a foal. Moses stepped forward slowly, hands raised. Let me try. Belmont hesitated, then nodded. Moses approached the stallion carefully, speaking in a low voice. Easy now. Easy. The boy's still breathing. You done what you needed to do. Now let him go. The stallion watched Moses with eyes that held too much intelligence for an animal. Then slowly, it stepped back. Moses knelt beside Colt, who was conscious but shaking from shock and pain. The brand on his shoulder was raw, blistered. The letters *Fira* burned into his flesh. You still with us? Moses whispered. Colt nodded. Good. Don't you forget what just happened here. That horse chose you. Chose to fight for you. That means something. Pike was clutching his bleeding shoulder, his face pale with rage and fear. That horse is rabid. It needs to be shot. No, Belmont said firmly. He was staring at the stallion with a strange expression, part anger, part fascination. That horse is worth more than you are, Pike. And apparently it won't work for anyone but the boy. He looked at Colt. Clean yourself up. Get back to work. And keep that animal under control. If it attacks anyone again, I'll shoot both of you. They untied the stallion. It walked to Colt and stood beside him as Moses helped the boy to his feet. The horse pressed its warm body against Colt's uninjured side, supporting his weight. Pike watched from a distance, still bleeding, his eyes burning with hatred. This isn't over, he muttered. Moses heard him. He whispered to Colt, you made an enemy today. A dangerous one. Watch yourself. Colt nodded. But as he walked back to the stable with the stallion beside him, he felt something new. Not pride, not defiance, something quieter and more dangerous. He felt *purpose*. For the first time in his 12 years of life, he understood that he was not alone. He was not nothing. He had an ally. A witness. A brother. And together, they were stronger than the white men realized. The scar on his shoulder would never fade. The word *Fira* would mark him forever. But years later, people would remember that brand differently. Not as a symbol of slavery, but as a warning. Because beasts, when cornered, when pushed too far, do not stay tame forever. They bite back. At 13, Colt understood 3 things with absolute certainty. White men feared what they could not control. The black stallion would die for him. And Pike was planning something terrible. The signs were obvious. Pike watched Colt with calculating eyes during morning roll call. He smiled when Colt walked past, not a friendly smile, but the smile of a man imagining violence. He asked questions about the stallion's temperament, its strength, its history of aggression. He was building a case for something. Moses noticed too. That man's got murder in his eyes, Moses told Colt one evening while reshoeing a plough horse. Not the quick kind. The kind where he wants you to suffer first. What can I do? Colt asked. Stay alert. Don't give him an excuse. Moses hammered a nail into the horseshoe. And if trouble comes, don't fight it head on. Water flows around rocks, not through them. Colt nodded, but he did not fully understand. Not yet. The trouble came on a September morning in 1851. Master Belmont's son, James, had returned from university in Charleston. James was 22, arrogant, and bored. He had grown up riding horses and believed himself an expert horseman. He saw the black stallion in the paddock and decided he wanted to ride it. That's the wild one, isn't it? James asked his father at breakfast. It was wild, Belmont said. The stable boy has it under control now. The slave boy. The little one. James laughed. If a child can ride it, so can I. Belmont frowned. The horse is temperamental. It only responds to the boy. Then the boy hasn't trained it properly. Let me show you how it's done. Belmont hesitated, but he was proud of his son and wanted to impress visiting neighbors. "Fine. But be careful." James walked to the paddock where the stallion grazed. Colt was nearby repairing a fence rail. He saw James approaching and felt ice form in his stomach. "You," James called. "Get me that horse. Saddle it." Colt stood slowly. "Sir, the horse I didn't ask for your opinion. I gave you an order." Colt looked at the stallion. The horse had lifted its head, ears pricked forward, sensing tension. Colt knew what would happen if James tried to mount. The stallion would throw him, maybe injure him, and Colt would be blamed. "Sir, please." "The horse isn't ready for." James stepped forward and struck Colt across the face. The blow was casual, contemptuous. "Do what you're told, boy." Colt's cheek burned. He tasted blood. But he walked to the stallion, placed a hand on its neck, whispered, "Easy. Please. Just this once, easy." The horse snorted but allowed Colt to lead it to the mounting block. Colt saddled it with shaking hands. The stallion's muscles were tense, coiled. It knew something was wrong. James mounted confidently. For exactly 3 seconds, the horse stood still. Then it exploded. The stallion reared, twisted, bucked with violent fury. James flew from the saddle and hit the ground hard. His head struck a fence post with a sickening crack. He lay motionless. White men came running. Master Belmont screamed his son's name. A doctor was summoned. James was carried to the house, unconscious, blood seeping from his scalp. Pike grabbed Colt by the throat and slammed him against the fence. "You did this. You trained that horse to kill." "No, shut up." Pike's grip tightened. "Master Belmont's son might die because of you and that demon horse. You know what happens now." Colt could barely breathe. He saw other enslaved workers watching from a distance, their faces filled with fear and pity. He saw Moses shaking his head slowly. Master Belmont walked over, his face gray with shock and rage. "Lock the boy in with the horse tonight. In the closed stable. Let's see if his gift can save him when there's nowhere to run." Pike smiled. "The horse has killed before, sir. It'll crush him." "Good," Belmont said coldly. "If my son dies, the boy pays with his life. If my son lives, maybe the horse will teach the boy a lesson about consequences." They dragged Colt to the large training stable, a barn with thick walls, heavy doors, and no windows except high vents near the roof. They threw him inside. The stallion was already there, agitated, pawing the ground. Pike locked the door from the outside with a heavy iron bar. "See you at dawn," Pike said through the door. "If you're still alive." Colt heard footsteps walking away. Then silence. He was alone with the horse in the darkness. The stable was not completely dark. Moonlight filtered through the roof vents, creating pale columns of light in the dusty air. Colt could see the stallion's silhouette. The horse was pacing, head tossing, breathing hard. Colt sat down slowly in the corner, making himself small. His heart pounded. He knew the stallion would not deliberately hurt him, but the horse was agitated, confused, locked in an unfamiliar space. Accidents happened. One panicked kick could kill him. He spoke quietly. "It's me. It's just me. You know me." The stallion continued pacing, but its ears flicked toward Colt's voice. "They're punishing us both," Colt continued. "But it's not your fault. You didn't want that man on your back. I know. I knew before it happened." The horse slowed its pacing. Colt kept talking. He talked about everything. About his mother, whom he never knew. About the night he was born, the story Ru had told him. About the years of sleeping in hay, eating scraps, being called a beast. About the brand on his shoulder. About Moses and his cryptic advice. About fear and loneliness, and the strange bond he felt with this animal that had saved his life before he could even remember. "You're all I have," Colt said quietly. "The only one who chose me. Everyone else, they tolerate me, or they use me, or they hate me. But you stayed." The stallion stopped pacing. It turned toward Colt, walked slowly across the stable, lowered its massive head until its nose touched Colt's chest. Colt wrapped his arms around the horse's neck. The animal was warm, solid, real. Its heartbeat was strong and steady. Colt pressed his face against the coarse manure and felt, for the first time in years, safe. They stayed like that for a long time. Then Colt lay down in the straw, and the stallion folded its legs and lay beside him, just as it had the night he was born. The horse's body heat radiated through the cool night air. Colt felt his breathing slow, synchronized with the horse's breathing in and out, in and out. He slept. When Pike opened the stable door at dawn, he expected to find a corpse. Instead, he found Colt standing in the center of the stable, alive and unharmed, one hand resting on the stallion's lowered head. The horse was calm, almost serene. Straw clung to Colt's clothes. His eyes were clear and steady. Pike stared. Behind him, several other white handlers had gathered, curious to see the aftermath. They had been taking bets on whether the boy would survive. Now they stood silent, unsettled. "How?" Pike's voice trailed off. Colt said nothing. He simply looked at Pike with an expression that made the overseer take an involuntary step backward. It was not defiance. It was not anger. It was something older and deeper. A knowing. A certainty. Master Belmont arrived moments later. His son James had regained consciousness during the night. The doctor said he would recover fully, a concussion, nothing more. Belmont was relieved, but he was also disturbed by the scene in the stable. "The boy survived," Pike said, his voice hollow. Belmont studied Colt and the horse. "So I see. The horse should have killed him, sir. It's killed before. It's vicious with everyone except him." Belmont finished the thought. He walked closer, stopping just outside the stable. "How did you do it, boy?" Colt met his eyes. "I listened." "Listened to what?" "To what the horse needed." Belmont frowned. "And what did it need?" "Not to be afraid." The words hung in the air. Belmont's face hardened. "Get back to work, both of you. Pike, I want extra security on this animal. And the boy sleeps in the loft from now on, not near the horse." "Yes, sir." But as Belmont walked away, he glanced back once. He looked uneasy, as if something in that stable had shifted the balance of power in a way he could not quite articulate. Pike glared at Colt. "You got lucky. But luck runs out." Colt said nothing. He led the stallion out of the stable and back to the paddock. Behind him, he heard whispers among the enslaved workers who had gathered to watch. The story would spread fast. The boy locked in with a killer horse had survived unharmed. The horse had bowed to him. By evening, everyone on the plantation knew. By the next day, enslaved people on neighboring plantations had heard. By the end of the week, free black people in the nearest town were talking about it. The white people told the story as a curiosity, a strange, quirk of nature. The enslaved people told it differently. They said it was a sign. They said God had, marked that boy for something. They said the horse was not just a horse. Moses found Colt in the stable that night. "You caused a stir, boy. I didn't do anything. You survived. That's something. That's more than something." Moses sat, down on a hay bale. "You know what they're saying? They're saying you got power. Spirit power, the kind that, can't be whipped out of you or sold away. I don't have power. I just understand the horse. Same thing, in a way." Moses leaned forward. "But listen to me careful, now. You got a choice to make. You can keep being what they want you to be, a useful tool, a boy who talks to horses, or you can be what you actually are." "What am I?" Moses, smiled sadly. "That's what you got to figure out. But whatever you decide, decide soon. Because Pike's not going to let this go. He's afraid of you now. And afraid white men are the most dangerous kind." Moses was right. Pike's fear turned to obsession. He began watching Colt constantly, looking for any excuse to punish him. He gave him impossible tasks, mucking out 20 stalls before breakfast, grooming every horse on the plantation in a single, afternoon, carrying buckets of water until his hands bled. Colt did the work without complaint. But Pike, was unsatisfied. He wanted Colt to break. To fail. To prove that the boy was not special, just lucky. The other enslaved workers noticed. Some felt sympathy for Colt. Others resented him. Why should he, music, get attention? Why should he be treated differently? Everyone, music, suffered. Everyone endured. What made him special? A man named Isaiah, music, who worked in the fields, confronted Colt one evening. You think you're better than us? You think because you got your horse, you don't have to worry about the fields, music, or the whip? I don't think I'm better than anyone, Colt said quietly. Then why don't you help us? We're planning to run. 3 families. 20 people. We need someone who knows the land, knows animals, knows I can't. Isaiah's face twisted with anger. Can't or won't? The horse isn't ready. The horse. What about us? What about? Isaiah stopped. He shook his head in disgust. You're a coward. You care more about that animal than your own people. Isaiah walked away. Colt stood alone in the fading light. Music, he wanted to explain. He wanted to say that running without preparation was suicide. Music, that Pike was watching everyone, that the timing was wrong. But he knew Isaiah would not listen. To Isaiah, Colt's refusal looked like betrayal. 2 weeks later, the escape attempt happened. 20 people fled at midnight, heading toward the swamps. They were caught by dawn. Dogs tracked them down. Armed white men on horseback rounded them up like cattle. One man, a field hand named Samuel, was killed trying to fight back. The others were returned to the plantation. Master Belmont made an example of the music leader, a woman named Dina. She was whipped 50 times in front of everyone. Music, she survived, but barely. The others were sold to different plantations, families torn apart, children separated from parents. Isaiah was sold south to Mississippi. Before he left, he looked at Colt with hatred. You could have warned us. You knew. You always know. Colt said nothing. Because Isaiah was right. Colt had sensed the escape was doomed. He had heard the white men talking, had seen Pike increase patrols, had felt the tension building. He could have warned them. But he had stayed silent, believing that silence would keep him safe. Now people were dead or destroyed, and Colt carried the weight of that silence. That night, he went to the stallion's stall and pressed his forehead against the horse's neck. Was I wrong? He whispered. Should I have gone with them? The horse had no answer. It simply stood there warm and alive, breathing steadily. Moses found him there. The old man's face was grave. Dina's going to die. Doctor says the wounds are infected. She won't last a week. Colt closed his eyes. It's my fault. No. It's their fault. Moses gestured toward the main house. Don't take on their sins. You did what you thought you had to do. Maybe it was right. Maybe it was wrong. But you're still here. And as long as you're here, you got a chance to do something with that. Do what? Moses did not answer. He just looked at Colt with tired, knowing eyes. Then he walked away. Dina died 6 days later. Her body was buried in the unmarked slave cemetery at the edge of the plantation. No preacher, no ceremony, just a hole in the ground and a wooden marker that would rot within a year. Colt attended the burial. He stood at the back, silent, while 20 enslaved people sang a low, mournful hymn. Some of them looked at him with accusation. Others avoided his eyes. He was a reminder of their own powerlessness. After the burial, Colt walked to the far pasture where the stallion grazed. The horse lifted its head as Colt approached. They stood together in the afternoon sun, watching clouds move across the sky. They hate me, Colt said. My own people hate me. The stallion nudged his shoulder. Pike hates me. Master Belmont uses me. Nobody sees me. They see the horse. They see what I can do, but they don't see me star. The horse whinnied softly. Colt placed his hand on the stallion's neck. You see me, don't you? The horse turned its head and looked at him. In those dark eyes, Colt saw something he had never seen in human eyes, complete, uncomplicated acceptance. He understood then why he trusted the horse more than people. People always wanted something: labor, obedience, submission, sacrifice. The horse wanted nothing except presence, companionship, truth. When the time comes, Colt whispered, we'll go together. Not before. Not after. Together. The stallion tossed its head as if in agreement. The next 3 years were brutal. Pike intensified his campaign of psychological torment. He would force Colt to watch other enslaved people being punished. He would describe in graphic detail what would happen if Colt ever disobeyed. He would threaten to kill the stallion, to sell Colt south, to do things worse than death. But Colt endured. He had learned the art of internal resistance. Outwardly he remained obedient, quiet, useful. Inwardly he was planning, watching, waiting. He studied the patterns of the plantation. He memorized the patrol schedules. He learned which dogs were vicious and which could be calmed. He identified the weak points in the fence line, the blind spots in the guard's vision, the times when the white men were drunk or distracted. And he trained the stallion, not